If you've played any video game in the past 16 years, it is very likely that you, intentionally or not, have unlocked a trophy or achievement while doing so. Whether you perfected the pattern of an incredibly demanding boss and finally beat him, solved a convoluted mystery, or went full gamer mode, chances are that you've seen a notification pop up on your screen shortly after, informing you about the newest achievement you've just unlocked. On most platforms, achievements and video games are so closely tied together nowadays that it is basically almost impossible to complete a game without unlocking at least a handful of them. But rather than only existing in the realm and within the boundaries of the very game you earned them in, trophies and achievements transcend far beyond that, becoming an imprint on your Steam, Xbox or PlayStation profile that will stay with you regardless of which title you play next. And it is this exact permanency that makes achievements so valuable to so many players, as each one of them contributes to your overall score or level, with some platforms even offering you to display them on your profile like a badge of honor. So with trophies and achievements now being something that affects players on a meta level and influencing how, or in extreme cases if they even want to play a game at all, it is not surprising at all that these digital goodies have taken on such an important role in the world of gaming. And though it may seem rather one-sided at first glance, developers too have massively profited from the seemingly simple concept of rewarding you for putting in some extra effort. You see, while some developers chose to constantly confront us with incredibly grindy, tedious, or even luck-dependent achievements to artificially boost player engagement, others went the polar opposite way and actively made it their purpose to produce products that solely revolve around achievements you can earn in them, rather than the other way around. With the consequence of that being that they are some of the most half-baked, uninspired and shameless pieces of crap you'll ever see. But how did we get here? When did nice little mementos you'd earn in video games mutate into justifications for ludicrous grind, uninspired designs, or blatant cash grab? And how would things be if achievements were instead used the correct way? To answer these questions, let's have a closer look at the good, the bad, and the ugly side of achievements and trophies, and figure out just what exactly it is about them that made them become so important in the first place. Let's jump right in. Before we take a deep dive into many of the negative aspects that achievements and trophies have undoubtedly brought to the world of gaming, I think it's important that we also look at a positive example, the gold standard of how this nice little feature can be used effectively to elevate one's experience with an already fantastic game. So let me tell you about one of my favorite experiences in terms of getting every single achievement and fully completing a game, which has to be with the third installment of the Witcher series. Not only is the game one of the best RPGs I've ever played, but to me, this game is what set the gold standard for a symbiotic relationship between games and achievements. The Witcher 3 has a total of 53 trophies for its base game, and out of all those achievements, which each have specific conditions that have to be met before they unlock, there are arguably just 2 or 3 of them that truly interrupt the flow of your experience with the game in any significant way. One of them demands that you roleplay in a very specific way, so that all your available companions make it to the final battle with you, which consequently heavily dictates how you have to approach certain encounters with them and definitely breaks the immersion a bit. And the other 2 are just very specific ways to get rid of enemies, which you most likely wouldn't naturally go for in combat. Other than that, there is arguably not even a single trophy in the entire list that truly has you go out of your way or do unnatural things to earn them. And yes, I do say this confidently, despite the fact that there's an achievement that demands that you find 120 unique collectibles, with some of them even being missable. You see, unlike GTA 4, which has you hunt down and kill 200 pigeons across a huge map just to reward you with a clunky helicopter that you'll barely use anyway, The Witcher 3's take on collectibles is quite refreshing in the sense that they have actual worth and value beyond their function as a souvenir. While the game still has you turn over every stone, loot every corpse, and talk to nearly every NPC in a world that is roughly 10 times the size of the aforementioned one in GTA 4, this time around, this massive pain in the ass is actually worth enduring, because rather than relics, mementos or sketches that will disappear in the depths of your inventory and most likely won't ever see the light of day again, this time around you're actually collecting trading cards. The reason why this matters is because of a neat little minigame called Gwent, a card game where you can use the trading cards you gathered on your journey to build your very own unique deck and take on heaps of different opponents that all have their respective playstyle and deck as well. Not only that, but there are multiple standalone quests built around the specific side activity that are extremely entertaining and build on each other. As you get better and better at the card game, add new trading cards to your collection that you either find on your adventures or take off the hands of your beaten opponents, and constantly refine your deck and strategy strategies, the game will introduce quest after quest that each pits you against better and better opponents. These quests ultimately culminate in a mission where you take part in a tournament where the very elite of Gwent players, which you are now part of, face off against each other and compete for a giant prize pool. As expected, everything goes completely off the rails and ends in brawls, bloodshed, and potentially even a new love interest for your character. What is important to point out here is that it is because of these rather mundane collectibles you painstakingly gathered that you even got to experience this very elaborate quest, meaning that for once it actually paid off that you scoured every last corner in the entire continent for these damn collectibles. Now, I'm fully aware that many of us are burnt children when it comes to having to partake in an in-game side activity for the sake of full completion. But even here, The Witcher 3 absolutely delivers, as Gwent was such a beloved and polished little minigame that the developers decided to turn it into a standalone title that still has a loyal little community to this very day. The collectibles in The Witcher 3 are not static, like ones we've seen in so many other games. They are an organic part of the world your adventure takes place in, so much so that they are a significant part of the gameplay and even considerably influence parts of Geralt's story. If all of this was still not enough to heal the deep wounds that other games and their respective collectibles caused you, and convince you that this time around the hunt for the elusive little items is worth it, then let me also add that rather than just rewarding you once for getting all the available cards, the game actually has 4 entire achievements that all concern Gwent in one way or another, adding yet another massive layer of incentive to give them a shot. This kind of seamless interaction between in-game rewards that consist of loot, items, and further glimpses into Geralt's fantastic story, and meta rewards that consist of shiny achievements which will now be permanently added to your collection, stretches through almost the entirety of The Witcher 3 like a red thread, which is why, despite having completed close to 100 games so far, there really isn't any other one that comes even close to how wonderfully this title managed to fuse gameplay and achievements together. I really meant it when I said that, at least to me, this is the gold standard. After having looked at such a fantastic example of how things are done right, I think it's only fair that we take an equally close look at how things are done wrong. And rather than comparing a blockbuster like The Witcher 3 to disgusting shovelware like the Tiger Tea, where your gameplay, if we can even call it that, literally consists of holding the X button, let's keep things fair and compare it to another colossal title that objectively uses achievements in a much worse way. And that title is Red Dead Redemption 2.
Say, what the hell are you doing here? And he said, what about Jim Milton?
Oh, he's even worse. What is that?
It's art.
It honestly kind of pains me to use such a fantastic title to make a point for how things should not be done, as it sits among some of the best games I've ever played. But it is because I have gotten the full completion after investing nearly 300 hours into the title and nearly suffered multiple nervous breakdowns throughout the ordeal that I find it only fair to name it as a prime example of how achievements can actually make games worse. Red Dead Redemption 2, in and of itself, is arguably one of the best games of all time. It has fantastic characters with lots of personality, amazing world building, brought the level of detail and finesse to the table that I've yet to see in any other video game, and most importantly, has probably the most believable and well-developed protagonist across the entire medium. Had the people in charge put even a fraction of this dedication to designing the achievement list for the title, it would have easily been Red Dead Redemption 2 that set the gold standard for how these digital goodies are best incorporated into games. But unfortunately, Red Dead Redemption 2 was also developed by Rockstar Games, the same people that had you hunt 200 pigeons over 3 different islands. For some reason, Rockstar Games seem to pride themselves with the philosophy that they need to do everything in their power to make full completion for their games borderline impossibly difficult and grindy. And oh man, did they double down on Red Dead Redemption 2. Red Dead Redemption 2's trophy list is filled to the brim with absolute abominations of achievements that ask you to perform all kinds of ridiculous feats, but for the sake of keeping things as short as possible, I'll do my best to point out only the worst offenders. With that said, it feels only fitting to start with the title's take on collectibles, as we have previously put such an emphasis on the ones in The Witcher 3. RDR2's collectibles are, in a very similar way to The Witcher, about as organic and non-static as they can be, because they are literally made up of the animals you encounter throughout your journey through the Wild West. Now, you do have to collect a majority of those animals in quite a literal way, with the game splitting the collection aspect in 2 different achievements. For one, there are a total of 162 animals in Red Dead Redemption 2 that you need to study, which means you need to get close enough to them so that Arthur can identify them. If that's not possible because they're out of your reach, you need to instead use your binoculars and, while keeping them in sight, will have to press and hold a specific button for a few seconds until they count as study. It's important to note that doing that with every single animal will unlock the zoologist achievement, whereas the skin deep one requires you to kill and skin 71 of them, which will earn you different pelts that you can use to create entirely new equipment. The fact that the collectibles in Red Dead Redemption 2 are such an integral part to its world, gameplay, and overall atmosphere, even more than the trading cards in The Witcher 3 were, is sadly where the similarities between the two games and the positive aspect of RDR2's collectibles come to an end. And the sole reason for that is RNG. You see, while the Gwen cards were equally much a pain in the ass to find and collect, with some of them even becoming missable depending on how far you progressed certain events in the story, they were at the very least reliably encounterable if you stuck to a guide or simply prioritized finding them first before making any other major decisions in the story. In Red Dead Redemption 2, however, the collectibles instead come each with their own unique spawn rate. There are common animals that are so abundantly present in basically any part of the virtual West that you won't ever have to go out of your way to find them. And then, and that's where the fun begins, there are also animals that are so incredibly rare to spawn that you might begin to question if they're really even in the game. The way that these rare creatures work in Red Dead 2 is that they only appear in rather specific areas, and if they don't, then that's your clue to reset the world, which you do by setting up camp near the supposed spawn spot, saving your game, loading the save you just made, sleeping, waking up, sleeping again, and then trying your luck once more and see if the fucker spawned this time around. If they didn't, you rinse and repeat until they do. One thing I remember quite vividly is how excruciatingly long this process of resetting the environment would take, as you're literally going from one impossibly long loading screen to another one. I say this as someone who was lucky enough to own a PlayStation 4 Pro at the point of trying to get this achievement, and still had to spend minutes at a time waiting for the game to load up. So I don't even want to imagine how mind-numbingly boring and slow the whole ordeal must have been for people that played the title on a regular PlayStation 4 or Xbox One. Lucky for you, Rockstar Games felt especially generous when creating this title's achievement list and made it so that you can combine the incredibly nasty Zoologist and Skin Deep with yet another contender for the most egregious achievement ever made, Grin and Bear It, which asks you to be mauled by bears and kill them afterwards, 18 times. There is no reward for doing this either, other than a bronze trophy or 10 gamer score. No secret, no joke, no Easter egg, no challenge, and most importantly, not a lot of bears either, as the animal that needs to first attack you and then has to be killed by you in a very specific manner is, like many others, also pretty hard to even find in the first place. To drive the point home one last time before I'm done bitching about it for good, let me just tell you what the grind for these free achievements realistically looks like. You start your journey at one of the utmost corners of the map and then plan a route that takes you through every single potential spawn point of these animals. If you're lucky, you might just finally find a new one to study or skin and add to your collection. But worry not, because even if the desired land animals won't spawn in one of the locations where they ought to be at, there is always the wide, endless sky to stare at while you ride to the next spawn point, which, by the way, is filled to the brim with birds that you also need to study for the achievement and that are arguably even more rare and unpredictable than their earthbound counterparts. What a nice distraction while you make your way to a pack of bears in hope that they'll nearly maul you to death before going to sleep and starting the whole cycle again. I swear guys, we are either looking at an incredibly shitty set of achievements that will genuinely sour your overall experience with an otherwise fantastic title by being unnecessarily tedious and grindy and consequently ruining every last bit of immersion you still had, or Rockstar has simply managed to simulate the average day of a 19th century village idiot from the Wild West so well that it went right over our heads. Assuming you do complete your compendium and kill 18 bears, Red Dead Redemption 2 is still not done annoying the absolute fuck out of you. For the rarest achievement in the entire game, you have to replay 70 out of the 104 missions and meet really arbitrary conditions to get gold medal ratings. What do you get for doing that? Well, in true RDR2 fashion, nothing. Besides the fact, of course, that you will have to replay roughly 3/4 of the game's story missions and will mostly be rated on how well you do on gameplay mechanics like shooting and traversing the environment, which, ironically, are both among the heaviest criticized aspects of the entire game, even among die-hard fans. On top of that, there are also challenges, 90 of them to be specific, divided into different subgroups. Herbalist challenges, for example, want you to collect all kinds of different and rare flowers and plants. Sharpshooter challenges need you to pull off extravagant stunts with your rifles, and worst of all, gambler challenges that more often than not have you compete in games like poker, blackjack or dominoes and rely on you to get incredibly lucky to even beat those challenges. Another nice little fuck you player from the developers, just in case you weren't fed up enough already after getting all the animals done. Then there's an online mode, a whole different beast that comes with its very own set of challenges, professions and missions, asking that you invest yet another minimum of 25 to 50 hours of your time if you want to unlock its respective achievements, all while being one of the most half-baked and unpolished online counterparts to a single-player game that I've ever seen, especially if you compare it to the colossal success of the multiplayer mode in GTA 5, made by the same company. The problem with achievements in Red Dead Redemption 2 is not that they're hard, not even when you look at the challenges or gold medals you need to get in a majority of the story missions. It is that the game provocatively asks the player again and again to prove how much tedious and boring bullshit he's willing to put up with if he wants to get the full completion. As always, the argument can be made that all of this is completely optional and not necessary, which, of course, is absolutely correct. You will factually have a better time with the game if you decide to stick to a casual playthrough and just take your time to enjoy the fantastic story and its characters, rather than trying to get everything done. What bothers me so much though is that the game uses every possible chance to remind you that there is, in fact, lots of stuff to do and that you haven't even scratched the surface of all of its possibilities yet. Every time you finish a mission, even if it's the first playthrough of the game you ever do, you will automatically be graded and receive a corresponding medal depending on how many of the related objectives you manage to complete, which will naturally make you look into the whole medal system. The compendium is no different. You'll eventually open it to look something up and see that there's plenty missing entries, which most players will instinctively want to complete. And even when just opening the menu, you will undoubtedly notice that there's an entire tab dedicated to progress, which contains everything there is to do. Red Dead Redemption 2 is sending very mixed signals. On one hand, it constantly drops you hints about how much there's left to do and explore, but on the other hand, it does nearly everything it can to make completing those tasks as unenjoyable and tedious as possible, to the point where it becomes self-destructive. The gold medal missions are a prime example, as the game willingly points a finger to its own shortcomings by stripping everything that made it great away, often forcing you to skip cutscenes and dialogue to finish a timed mission goal and having you master the raw mechanics like shooting and navigating the environment, which, like we already said, are honestly the least enjoyable parts of the game. Add that to the fact that you will inevitably run into glitches and bugs while in the middle of your missions, which normally wouldn't be a big deal and completely understandable, given that RDR2 is just an enormous game, but now that you're actually on a timer or depend on things to work absolutely perfectly so that you can earn a gold medal ranking, it is just another kick in the head that will turn even the biggest fans bitter given enough time. Red Dead Redemption 2 is a fantastic game on its own, made much worse by the way achievements and trophies were designed around it. And that shows especially when compared to another fantastic game that correctly used its own achievements and trophies to alleviate its strengths and compensate for its weaknesses. I know that there's an incredible amount of nuance to this topic and that there are near infinite examples that we could bring up to argue that achievements both make video games better or worse. But it is exactly because Red Dead Redemption 2 and The Witcher 3 are both such outliers that I wanted to shed some light at them. What ultimately matters the most to me though is clearly the fact that while achievements do have the potential to make great titles even more satisfying to experience and complete if used correctly, they are proportionally just so much more impactful in making a fantastic game worse. Even if we look at how great The Witcher 3's achievement list was designed around the game, there's always going to be a substantial amount of players that will have their experience soured by going for all the achievements. Be that because they don't like the rather unnecessary combat challenges, the races, or, despite how well it was made, just can't get into Gwent. It is simply bizarre that even in the best case possible, you will have to spend at least a handful of hours completing challenges that don't serve any real purpose other than breaking your immersion and involvement in the title. Remember, this is a given in even the best case scenario, and considering that those kind of games are an absolute exception and many titles have made it their purpose to at least add one or the other annoying achievement that will arguably be a a pain to do, you will ultimately almost always have to trade in fun, immersion, or even your overall impression of a game for an ultimately worthless collectible. Which is why, honestly, going for the achievement will almost always be the worst choice than not doing so. After talking extensively about the very easily identifiable good and bad usage of achievements in gaming, I think it's important that we also mention a less definable area, a type of grey zone, dominated by a very specific kind of trophy or achievement type that, in a bizarre way, is extremely dynamic by nature, while at the same time also being crystal clear and straightforward with its demands. The kind of achievements I want to talk about here are those that are tied to games that require nothing but raw skill from its players and actively try to reduce RNG and other external factors that could intervene with their gameplay to a minimum. The reason it is so hard to judge whether these kind of achievements are good or bad is because they fulfill or even exceed the very purpose of the game they were implemented in. Take Crypt of the Necrodancer for example, a rhythm-based video game that is so unbelievably difficult to fully beat that there are only 19 known people that have earned its final trophy on PlayStation, with the average completion sitting at 4%. Is it justified that a game like this one, that defines itself through absurd difficulty and pitch-perfect reaction times, demands that you beat it with every single character back to back and stay focused for hours on end without dying even once? Honestly, I have no clue. Hell, I even talked to 2 of the 19 people who managed to somehow beat this nightmare, and they personally admitted to me that the game literally frustrated them to a point where it started to affect them in real life. Other fantastic titles, such as Hollow Knight, Super Meat Boy, Cuphead, and even Devil May Cry 5 are a similar story, each having achievements that are not necessarily hard if you got the skills to pull off what they demand, but realistically, a vast majority of the people that will eventually earn them will need to be willing to invest potentially many hundreds of hours more than Red Dead Redemption 2's insanely grindy achievements would take them. Yet, despite that, there's something about the fact that these specific kind of achievements are so aligned with the nature of the games they're part of, and so nonchalantly straightforward and honest about the fact that they will cost you your sanity and probably multiple controllers if you attempt to beat them, that I just can't look down on them the same way I do with mindlessly grindy and heavily RNG influenced achievements and trophies. Here, the games do not throw you any curveballs. There is no deception or bait involved, no grindiness for the sake of grinding and extending your hours and engagement with the games, no cheap shots, just the demand for an unholy amount of personal skill and perfection in your gameplay. You buy a hardcore game and it will demand that you pull off hardcore feats if you want to be one of the very few people who will fully complete the title. Simple as that. Now, I know that I'm being extremely biased here, and that there are lots of points about these type of achievements to criticize too, like the fact that a huge part of the audience of these hard games simply doesn't have the skill set or just isn't willing to spend all the time it would take to become good enough to hit the arbitrary thresholds these achievements set. Or what about the fact that your engagement with these titles and the hours you invest into them will inevitably also be artificially boosted due to unrealistically difficult challenges? Or the fact that even games that aren't necessarily aimed at a hardcore audience are steadily introducing achievements that make you beat them on their respective hardest difficulties, or even have you do speedruns. I hear you, and these points are absolutely valid. Funny enough, while recording the audio for this video, someone left a comment on another video I made about the Crypt of the Necrodancer, and I'd really like to show it to you because it just summarizes everything I've been trying to explain perfectly. Quote, Necrodancer used to be a favorite game of mine, but the achievements always stuck out to me as something that dragged the game down. So many of them feel so incredibly painful instead of fun. So when I reached my limit to what I felt I was able to do, it didn't feel so much as I had done a lot with the game, it just felt like I was being cut short because the devs pursued absurd difficulty over interesting fun. I'm probably never touching the game again. Unquote. So to summarize, these kind of achievements seem to be the most polarizing ones. On one hand, they seem to be what accelerates the dedication and fun someone can have with a hardcore title by being the one incentive these players really need for truly wanting to become a master at the game they play. And on the other hand, they also seem to act like an absolute turn-off for those that just don't see the point in trying that hard and completely turn them away, even making them drop entire games over those kind of achievements. These extreme reactions that these skill-demanding achievements provoke make me want to place them somewhere in the middle between the good and bad that are so much easier to identify and judge. So I would honestly absolutely love to hear what you guys think about this issue in the comment section. Maybe then we will finally arrive at an actual conclusion on what exact purpose these achievements actually serve. For the final part of this video, I think it's only appropriate that I left you guys with a warning. A tale of the monstrosity that achievements and trophies can turn into if we forget the initial benign purpose they were created for. Because while these shiny little goodies are essentially nothing more than mementos for arbitrary challenges you completed in different video games, they do have a secondary function that to most people makes them much more valuable than that. You see, both achievements as well as trophies basically act as a building block for a meta level score system on your account. Every trophy or achievement you earn will add a specific amount of value to your overall score. Those that are difficult to complete giving you a higher score, and those that are easy to complete giving you a lower score. With a system like that in place, people naturally began to wonder which account had the highest level, or in other words, who it was that had gathered the most achievements or trophies, and more importantly, how they themselves were doing. With entire websites that would be created for the sole purpose to specifically answer those and many more questions, allowing anyone to see their current position on the leaderboard, not just compared to players worldwide but even on a regional level with the click of a single button, it was only natural that a massive wave of new players would join an already existing, incredibly competitive and dedicated community. Not only did more and more players try to complete every single game they owned now, but there would also be those that would try to earn achievements as effectively as possible to maximize the growth of their accounts, those that would not tolerate having their profile show anything less than 100% overall completion for their games, and thus avoiding any title that they would perceive as too difficult or demanding to beat, and then there were even some players who would avoid playing any game that was released before it became standard procedure to implement achievements and trophies into titles, deeming those kind of games not worth their time anymore. Bizarrely enough, there now was a substantial number of players who would let achievements, a feature that was originally intended as a nice little gimmick, heavily influence their decision on which title they should play next, or if they should play it at all. Now, it's very important to mention that there's a lot of nuance in this topic. Not everyone who likes achievements will automatically take on such an extreme stance on the issue and choose or drop entire games over them, or dedicate the entire time they're playing video games solely to the purpose of completing every game they touch, but it is simply undeniable that the implementation of achievements had a major impact on the way a huge number of people will now interact with the medium as a whole. Be it because they just got hung up on the funny little jingle that plays when you unlock a trophy and decided to try and spend an extra hour to get another one, only to ultimately forget about it when it got too annoying and never bothering with it again, or because they only ever went for full completion once because it happened to be a game that they really enjoyed and didn't mind spending some extra time with the title. The very fact alone that achievements had enough of an influence to change the playstyle of even the more casual players, albeit in a rather minimal way, really speaks for how much of an impact they had on gaming as a whole. Sony especially seemed to really get wind of this and launched multiple campaigns where players would get some extra worth out of diligently collecting trophies on their platform. Where it was once possible to straight up trade trophy points for credit on the PlayStation Store that could buy you entire games, the newest campaign, PlayStation Stars, has you collect trophies and make online purchases in exchange for level ups that will ultimately get you priority support, which basically just means that you will get superior customer service if you make it to the highest level. Note that even here, Sony's criteria for reaching that level isn't just that you give them money, it's that you show your diligence by earning a significant number of rare and above grade trophies for each level. And while Xbox never did anything nearly as flashy or innovative, they still cared enough to at least give the record holder for the highest gamerscore points at the time a lifetime subscription of Xbox Live. Even Reddit, for whatever reason, has achievements now, making me hate this dumb fucking website even more. All of that to say that the influence achievements had on players and the way they interacted with games did not go unnoticed. Just as titles like Red Dead Redemption 2 and Mortal Kombat would ask their player base how much time they were willing to dedicate to get to full completion in pretty fantastic games, there now was a steady rise of titles that would pose the inverted question: how big of a piece of shit can we produce and still get you to purchase and play, as long as it's sprinkled with an unproportionally high amount of trophies and gamer score that you can earn within minutes? And boy, did players around the world answer that question. Shovelware, or in other words, games that were purposely designed with poor quality and the quantity over quality approach, have always been a thing. So much so that there were entire companies that made it their purpose to pump out as many games as humanly possible while also investing as little time into their development as they possibly could, often baiting unsuspecting customers into buying them by acquiring a popular license and developing a game around it. As you can imagine, the fact that there was now a substantial amount of people that were happy to throw their money at anyone that offered them a quick and easy way to get a lot of trophies or achievements in minimal time was a golden opportunity for developers that did not mind feeding that very specific demand, which led to games such as My Name is Mayo. The gameplay, which is a very generous term to use here, consists of you pressing a button. That is it. You tap the mayonnaise jar again and again until you unlock dumb little costumes for it, equip them, and then get to button pressing again. Do this 10,000 times, which will take you roughly half an hour, and you will suddenly realize that you've unlocked 51 trophies or achievements and have made significant progress on your overall game score or trophy level. And it is this exact progress that is the sole selling point of these kind of games. Because remember, completing this title, which will take you roughly half an hour, will translate into the exact same amount of points as completing all of Red Dead Redemption 2, which, as previously mentioned, will realistically take you around 250 hours to complete. Where My Name is Mayo at least cared enough to add some nice little gimmicks and things like a menu, newer iterations got more and more bare bones, stripping away feature after feature while still testing the waters in just how little of a fuck they could give about the products they were shipping, as long as it came with lots of trophies and achievements. And, well, I think we found the answer. Not only did every new wave of these games get worse, but it would soon also be common practice to make use of the fact that games can have multiple trophy and achievement lists for different regions around the world, meaning that you could now buy one of these atrocities, get every single achievement in as little as a minute, and then buy it again, with some of these titles essentially re-releasing 7 entire times, changing nothing but the platform and region they were on, while remaining the exact same piece of crap. One of the most shameless contenders among the shovelware franchises has to be the Stroke D franchise, an entire assortment of video games that follows the following formula: insert a low quality picture of an animal, tell the player to hold down a button, shower him with trophies that he can all earn within a couple of minutes, move on to the next animal, rinse and repeat. While I absolutely despise these kind of games, there's just something that is so bizarre about how self-aware, shameless, and bold the devs were about these absolute pieces of shit they were producing that it's honestly just kind of funny. It's like they're laughing in your face and make fun of you while you pay them to play these absolute piles of garbage. So much so that they even went out of their way to choose rather interesting animals for some of their titles. You have Stroke the Beaver, Stroke the Snake, and what has to be my absolute favorite because it's just about as clever of a title as this entire franchise is, Stroke the Dick Dick. The renowned Stroke D franchise spans 117 titles, 8,349 trophies, and considering you finish all of them, will add 158,580 experience to your account. And just to give you an idea of how absolutely absurd that is, my very own PlayStation account that I've actively been playing and trophy hunting on since 2018 have gotten 102 platinum trophies with, and have used to spend literally thousands of hours on games since then, only has a total of 151,425 points. If we very generously assume that each Stroke D game will take you around 10 minutes to complete, you could get well past all the progress I've made over the span of 6 years within less than 20 hours. Now, as much as I would love to continue shitting on these games, it is important to remember that none of these products would have enjoyed the popularity and attention that they earned within the last few years if there wasn't a real and substantial demand for them. There is a considerable number of players that will buy anything they can get their hands on if it means that they will get lots of achievements within minutes of gameplay. And while I'm not saying that there's thousands of players that completed the entire Stroke D franchise, it is still worth mentioning that even when looking at accounts that are only within the range of the top 100,000 trophy hunters in the world, it is still an absolute exception to come across an account that has not made use of one or the other trophy farming shovelware title and bought it multiple times across different regions. To say it bluntly, there is just no way you're going to have a chance to get anywhere near a notable position on the leaderboard if you aren't buying into the shit game trophy spam cycle, which is why they are a pretty sustainable business model for many developers who recognized that the worth of what was once an accessory to a video game had, to many people, become more important than the gaming experience itself. What I always find funny too is that many of the players who bought into this little scheme will get extremely defensive if questioned or criticized about it ever so slightly. Similar to how an alcoholic will scream and shout at you if you tell him that he shouldn't be drinking at 10 in the morning, a guy whose profile profile is filled to the brim with shovelware will tell you to go fuck off and mind your own business when you tell him that he probably shouldn't be spending his hard-earned money on barely functional video games. Even if we look past the very dedicated part of the community that buys shovelware titles to get their trophies, there just has to be some sort of underlying attachment to achievements that affects even the much more casual player base. Even if I look back at my own behavior over the years, I can clearly say that I spent dozens if not hundreds of hours by doing challenges that I would never have done or even attempted if it wasn't for the sake of nice, rare little trophies that would eventually decorate my profile. Be it the 350 hours I spent in Red Dead Redemption 2, the dozens of hours I spent trying to finally get good enough to get through the gauntlet in record time in Titanfall 2, or even just all those times I forced myself to fully complete games I never even liked much to begin with. Looking at all that, it becomes crystal clear that I too, while sitting on my high horse and talking about how dumb it is to buy into shovelware, have often made the choice to prioritize the worth of trophies that are ultimately meaningless over my gameplay experience, fun, and use of personal time. And even though I never bought a shovelware title on PlayStation, I arguably spent my time even worse by instead completing egregiously bad titles for the sake of achievements without even optimizing the rate at which I was getting them. All of this behavior that we just mentioned makes it extremely necessary that we talk about the most important factor in perhaps this entire discussion: self-responsibility. You see, despite the nice jingles and flashy little animations that you're showered with whenever you earn a trophy or achievement, the choice of whether you want to pursue these digital collectibles is always and entirely in your hands. There is no incredibly coveted reward, no remarkable glory or praise beyond what you will get from other trophy or achievement hunters, and definitely no higher power that forces you to spend your hard-earned money or precious time on the sole purpose of increasing your gamer score, trophy level, or total number of achievements you've earned. I know that this should go without saying, but the thousands of incredibly shameless and lazy, yet very lucrative shovelware games tell me otherwise, which is why I want to point it out as clearly as I possibly can. At the end of the day, achievements and trophies do not matter at all. Sure, there are highly specific, small rewards that you can get for earning trophies, and being at the very top of the leaderboard will get you lots of attention, no doubt. But for 99% of all players, it simply is not worth dedicating unholy amounts of money, and especially time, which they could have spent doing something that is actually fun and fulfilling instead, to trophies and achievements. What I personally find so crazy is that, taken at face value, everyone would agree with this statement and find it quite obvious. But in practice, there's just something so captivating about those dumb little achievements that makes them so desirable and easy to glorify way beyond their actual worth. Be it the fact that they are a permanent proof of the challenges you've overcome and stay on your profile long after you've stopped playing the game you initially unlocked them in, or the way that they let you compete against other players worldwide, or simply the fact that it's just so damn satisfying to not only beat a seemingly impossible challenge in and of itself, but also earn a beautiful, shiny little reward along with it that gives you near unlimited bragging rights. At the end of the day, it's important to mention that trophies and achievements can definitely elevate the experience you have with a game and be a very positive incentive that makes you want to explore quest lines and look into virtual corners you would have previously ignored. But the titles where this really applies are sadly just far and few between. Too often have achievements been used to justify lazily designed New Game Plus mode playthroughs, pointless challenges which are not only extremely hard to beat, but also add nothing to the overall experience with the game, and had you indulge in multiplayer modes that were either extremely grindy or were completely abandoned by the developers a few years after the titles first premiered. What definitely annoys me the most, and was the final nail in the coffin to me personally, is that what started as a nice little gimmick would mutate into the main reason why shovelware shit games would arguably enter a golden age, with the PlayStation Store specifically being so flooded with them that they would dominate the front page constantly and shoving every actual game in the background. Even if we completely ignore the shovelware though, what all of our points ultimately boil down to is that, if given enough importance, achievements and trophies have infinitely more potential to make your interaction with otherwise fantastic titles worse rather than elevating it. Now, does that mean that you should automatically assume that any good title will almost certainly be worse if you go for a full completion? That trophy lists which are linked to decent games should not even be checked out, as it will inevitably make an okay game turn to shit? Well, not really. I think the key word here, as with almost anything, is moderation. See, there is absolutely no need to force yourself through 200 plus hours of content you do not really care about and hate every waking second of, just so that you can eventually get a shiny platinum trophy to show off with, while being so burnt out with the actual game that you inevitably put it away and never touch it again. And at the same time, there is absolutely nothing that speaks against dedicating an extra 10, 20, or even 30 hours with a title you enjoy lots. At the end of the day, what matters most is that you are having fun doing what you're doing and adjust the way you approach achievements to what suits you best. If you truly get a thrill out of perfecting your playstyle and genuinely still find it fun and exciting to do so, even after spending hundreds of hours with games like Crypt of the Necrodancer or Super Meat Boy, then that's fantastic. And if you're someone who mainly plays games to experience epic storytelling, fantastic characters, and amazing world building, then that is perfectly fine too. What ultimately matters is that you don't prioritize and overvalue achievements to a point where they become more important than the actual experience with the title you're playing. Because once you start doing that, you might as well just go and stroke the dick. Friends, we've once again made it to the end of the video. What do you think? Do you agree or disagree with what I said? What was your favorite or least favorite experience with achievements? Make absolutely sure to let me know what your thoughts and opinions are in the comments, as I read every single thing you guys write. We have recently crossed 3,500 subscribers, and I'm super happy with the huge support this channel has been getting. So honestly, thank you so much for that. These videos take a long time to make, and I don't think I would enjoy doing them even half as much as I do if it wasn't for the amazing feedback and support from you guys. Lastly though, and most importantly, thank you guys so much for spending your precious time by watching my content. It truly means the world to me. See you in the next video, friends. Take care and be well.